Welcome to Capitol Preview, a weekly bipartisan discussion with Iowa legislators about the key issues facing our state. Brought to you by Mediacom.
Welcome to another edition of Capitol Preview, the show dedicated to educating our viewers on items important to Iowa. Our guest this morning is Senator Charles Schneider, Republican from West Des Moines, Waukee, Windsor Heights, and Clive. Charles, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you this morning.
It's good to be here again.
You know, on this snowy morning, we're going to delve right into some issues that you're facing or interested in up at the State House. And our first one this morning, one of your major goals for this session is tax reform. It's a hot item. It's a big thing going on up there right now. What will that look like, and why is that necessary?
Yeah, you're right, Bill. This is something I have talked about a lot and consistently since I was elected to the Senate. And the evidence is clear when you look at census data, U.S. Census data, and IRS data. People and wealth are moving from high-tax states like California and New York to low-tax states like Florida, North Carolina, Texas. Even in the Midwest, people are moving and wealth is moving to low-tax states like South Dakota and Wyoming. And the reason for that is pretty clear. People want to keep more of their own money. Businesses want to be able to use more of their own money to invest in their business or hire new people. And Iowa just has not been competitive when it comes to income tax in a long time. And there are a couple of indicators that really illustrate that well. One is the Tax Foundation's ranking of business tax climate. Iowa has consistently ranked 40th or 41st in that rating. Another indicator is a Wall Street Journal editorial that came out in last December, that talked about tax policy of the different states. And it ranked or showed a list of the states with the top 10 highest tax rates. And right there at number 5 was the state of Iowa. And we need to do better than that to compete. We don't have mountains or oceans or pleasant weather year-round, so we know we're not going to be able to compete on those types of intangibles. That makes it all the more important that we're able to compete when it comes to having a sound tax policy.
Yeah. So what are some of the issues or items that could be done in order to improve that tax policy? I mean, do you have some major industry that you want to lure here to Iowa? I mean, I know the data centers are coming to Iowa in big numbers. So
yeah, all of the above. I mean, we want to get as much business in our state as we can, as far as I'm concerned, and we want to keep as many people here as we can.
In order to do that.
Well, the important thing we have a lot of programs right now with a lot of different tax incentives. Which is part of the problem. The tax incentives we could dial back and plow into lowering the rates, and I think we should, and that's something that I've been talking about for a long time.
For a long range fix, right?
Yep, exactly.
Short term.
Yeah. And the tax credits that we have right now are really a symptom of having a bad tax climate. We've implemented a lot of these tax breaks in order to lure businesses here to offset our high income tax rate. So if we can get rid of some of those, use that to lower our overall rate and lesser the burden on Iowans, then I think that's a win for everybody.
I do think that I see around me, there's a lot of people that are still coming to Iowa, though, from big cities and both coasts, because the cost of living is cheaper for housing. School systems are great. Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of both sides of the coin, right?
Yeah, and if we had a good tax policy, if we had lower income taxes, then we would be able to use those advantages more to our advantage.
Right.
We'd be able to sell those better. And right now, sometimes people don't even take a look at our state to find out that we have low commute times and a great educated workforce and a low cost of living, because they see how high our tax rate is and they just move on.
And to be fair, you're talking more, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you're talking more of the commercial tax base than you're the residential tax base.
I'm talking both. Because a lot of businesses pay personal income tax because they're limited liability companies or subchapter S corporations, and they all pay tax at the individual rate.
There's been a lot of conversation about tax credits and tax incentive, which is what we've kind of touched on a little bit here. Will the legislature look at those in this year?
We will. I think we'll see a more robust look at the different tax incentive programs that we have after this session's over. Governor Reynolds has indicated that she wants to put together a task force to look at all of the tax breaks and tax exemptions that we have and decide which ones really are working. And some of them do work better than others. Some of them you just can't quantify, though, and it's best just to get rid of. We're even looking at some of these now through the de-appropriations process that we're going through. There's a high-quality jobs tax credit that's kind of like a corporate welfare fund that the state can use to give cash payments to companies to try and lure them here. The legislature has funded that at about $15 million a year, and we propose to claw back $7 million of that in the de-appropriations bill to take some of the burden off and some of the pain away from other budget units.
Well, it sounds like you're trying to get a handle on it, which is good.
Trying to,
yeah. It's complicated. Everybody knows that. I mean, because nobody wants to give up, anything, any programs, and taxes what pay for our programs, right? So, yeah. You chair the Senate Appropriations Committee that are dealing with other de-appropriations. Why is that necessary? De-appropriation.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question because Iowa is growing. The economy is still growing. We're still seeing more revenue year over year than we have in the past. Our unemployment rate is below 3%. So on paper, it looks like everything should be just moving along and revenue should be increasing 4 or 5%. But that's not the case. And different people will tell you different reasons. Some of it's political spin. What I like to do is look at a Moody's report that was issued about 6 months ago that helps explain why we're in the current situation we're in. And they point to 3 factors. One is a slowdown in the overall ag economy. And we have so much ag business in the state that if there's a slowdown there, it's gonna hurt our state finances.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The second reason is more and more people are buying goods online to retailers who don't remit sales tax to the state. So we're not seeing as much of a growth in sales tax revenue as we have in the past. And the third reason is that we spent down a $900 million surplus that we had at the end of fiscal year 13. I shouldn't say we because I voted against all the budget bills, as did the other Senate Republicans, because we knew that the overall budget bills were spending more than we were seeing in terms of an increase in state revenue. But Moody's pointed to that, and it's very true. If we had more of a budget surplus at the end of the year, then we wouldn't have to de-appropriate money this year. So when you take all those factors together, that explains why we are where we are.
Just because I'm curious, so how does the rainy day fund, how's that faring right now? Is it pretty healthy, or have they taken some money away to help patch holes in the budget, or?
Yeah, so we have 2 funds, an economic emergency fund and a cash reserve fund, and those are both commonly referred to as the rainy day funds. They're both still healthy. We did have to transfer money out of the cash reserve fund last year after the revenue estimate came in even lower than what was projected. And the governor transferred money out of the economic emergency fund after the end of the fiscal year last year to help revenues align with expenses, because we're constitutionally required to pass a balanced budget. And under state law, we can only spend 99% of state revenue.
Explain to me that revenue estimating committee, because I think that is a big part of this whole tax thing. Right? And I'm sure the people out there don't always know that there is a board that sits and estimates. And why have they been off?
Sure. Just to wrap up the last question, we have committed to fully repay the cash reserve fund and the economic emergency fund this year too. So we'll be full again. The revenue estimating conference is a group of 3 people who meet. It used to be quarterly, now it's 3 times a year. And they take a look at different data sets and data points to estimate what revenue is going to be for the next fiscal year and what revenue is for the current fiscal year. Now, by law, the legislature can only spend 99% of what the REC estimates the revenues will be at their December meeting. They'll meet again in March, and if their revenue estimate in March ends up being lower than what it was in December, we have to use the March number. But if the March number is higher than the December number, we still have to use the December number. Yeah. So I think that's good because we're using the lesser of the two amounts every time. Yeah. And under state law, we can only spend 99% of that revenue estimate.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to point, it's complicated. I mean, it's not an easy fix, or it'd be fixed by now. So.
Yeah, and one thing that we've seen across the country is revenue estimates have been off, not just in Iowa, but in 35 states. There are a lot of states that are going through what we are right now.
Yeah. IPERS, that's the Iowa Employee Pension, right?
Yeah, the Iowa Public Employees Retirement System.
Yeah. I always refer to it as IPERS, so I don't get the acronym right. Yeah. But I think that IPERS has been in conversations a lot lately. So recently you reported that it was almost a $7 billion unfunded liability. Is there something we should be paying attention to?
I think it is something we need to be paying attention to. The item that was in the news most recently is IPERS lowered one of its key assumptions, the return on investment, and because it lowered that to a more realistic number, that increased the unfunded liability by about $1.4 billion. So now the total unfunded liability is $7 billion, and that might not mean much to the ordinary guy on the street, but what that means basically is IPERS needs $7 billion more than what it has today in order to meet all of its obligations to public employees. And I want to make sure that we as a state are able to meet our commitments to our hardworking public employees.
Absolutely.
And part of that is making sure that we're using reasonable estimates so that we're setting enough money aside to help provide for their retirement. And the most recent change that IPERS made, I think, is evidence that we ought to take a further look at some of these estimates to make sure they are in fact accurate.
Senator, we have time for one more quick question, so we'll just kind of address it. The caucuses are tonight. You know, our famous caucus program are tonight. So what are you going to be doing tonight?
I'll be at my precinct caucus.
And what time do those start?
They start at 7.
Start at 7.
Yeah.
So what really is decided in those caucuses this year, since it's not a presidential election year? It's a gubernatorial. Will there be caucusing for gubernatorial candidates? And
yeah, there'll be, gubernatorial candidates. There are also several people who've indicated they're going to run for Secretary of Agriculture, so I'm sure they'll be gathering signatures for their ballot bid. Local legislators, I'm not on the ballot, but Representative Rob Taylor is. I'm sure he'll be getting signatures to get his name on the ballot as well. People at the caucuses will select who they want to go on to the district convention and the state convention. They'll decide on party platform planks. So it's an opportunity for people to really get involved and have a say in the process.
Okay, well, I appreciate your spending time with us. Senator Charles Schneider, Republican from West Des Moines. Appreciate your insights and your answers to some kind of touchy questions. So
yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us again on Capitol Preview. Stay tuned for the next show.